Hey everybody, this is GGB. I'm recording in the car today, sorry. This video is probably going to come out a little bit later than I would have liked it to. I couldn't do much about that. I had a lot of classes today, and I'm recording this in my free time. But we had no upsets yesterday, so the first thing we had to go to talk about is Big East games. At 5:30, we have number 9 Providence, which sits at 24-3, traveling to number 11 Villanova, which is at 21-7. Villanova favored by 10 on FS1. And this is one of those games where whoever wins, it doesn't make a huge difference outside of seeding in the huge picture, right? Providence has basically locked up the 1 seed. Now Villanova hasn't locked up the 2 spot yet, so I guess that's what this game is important for. If Providence wins, UConn would only be 2 games back in the win column from passing Villanova, which would be good for the Huskies. That's basically where we're sitting here. That's the only thing that really could change all that much. Providence already has the 1 seed in the Big East locked up. Moving on, we have some SEC basketball games we should get into. 5:30 we have number 13 Tennessee, which is at 21-7, traveling to Georgia, which is at 6-23. Tennessee is favored by 16.5 points on the SEC network. At 6 o'clock, we have Ole Miss, which is at 13-16, traveling number 7 Kentucky, which is at 23-6. Kentucky favored by 17 points on ESPN. And yeah, that's what we have in the SEC. We got some Big 10, Big 12, ACC, American, and Pac-12. That's a lot of games, a lot of things to go over today. But Kentucky's an interesting one because obviously, if Kentucky and Tennessee both win this basketball game, they both move to 13-4. They would pass Arkansas, at least for the present moment. Tennessee would move into 3rd place. Now, if Tennessee was to win and Arkansas was to lose, Tennessee would be in 2nd place, at least for the present moment. Again, Arkansas hasn't played yet this week, so this would be a little bit unfair. Arkansas would have played 1 less game, then Tennessee would at least put Tennessee in a good position. If Kentucky wins and Tennessee wins, they both move to 13-4, only half a game back or 1 game in the loss column, if you want to think about it that way, behind Auburn. Auburn obviously has the tiebreaker over those two, with a significantly better, actually only really 1 or 2 games better overall record than Kentucky. But actually it would only be 1 game better overall than Kentucky, but regardless, Auburn would have the tiebreaker in that respect. So Kentucky's got to overtake them outright, and they got to have a better record. But it's going to be interesting for sure down the stretch if Kentucky and Tennessee can put themselves in a position where Auburn just needs to slip up 1 time. With a loss, Arkansas would move into 2nd place, at least for the present moment. That's all that's going to happen. And Kentucky and Tennessee would enter a tie for 3rd and 4th. If Kentucky was to win, Tennessee was to lose. Whoever loses goes into 4th place. If they both lose, then they go into a tie for 3rd. Georgia is locked up last place, so I don't really feel like there's a lot to talk about there. Ole Miss is a little bit more interesting. Ole Miss is in a very close race for 2nd to worst with Missouri. Ole Miss with a loss would be not great, but Missouri's probably going to lose anyways. Ole Miss, I wouldn't be too worried about it. With a win, though, for Ole Miss, you would only be 1 game back, or I don't know, you would play 1 more game. It would be at 5-12, and Vanderbilt would be at 6-10. You could, at the very least, conceivably pass Vanderbilt. It's still in your realm of possibility for Ole Miss. That's why you want to win here today. But mainly, you just don't want to drop into 2nd to last place, which is what would happen with a loss. Moving on to the Big 10, we have at 6 o'clock, Nebraska, which is at 8-21, traveling to number 23, Ohio State, which is at 18-8. Ohio State favored by 14.5 points on the Big 10 network. And at 8 o'clock, we have number 8, Purdue, which is at 24-5, traveling to number 10, Wisconsin, which is at 25-5. Purdue favored by 2.5 points on ESPN, and that's going to be probably the biggest game of the night and quite possibly of the week. It could be a game that likely determines who wins the Big 10 Conference. A huge, huge basketball game. Wisconsin win it, they likely lock up that conference. If Purdue wins it, Illinois and Purdue are both still in the race for that number 1 overall seed, which is pretty amazing. Obviously, so if Purdue wins this game, they move to 14-5, and Wisconsin would fall to 14-5. They would enter a tie. Purdue would have the better overall record, so they would pass Wisconsin. They would have split the in-series. Purdue would become the number 1 overall seed. At least for now, it would be very interesting to see how a tiebreaker would work out, though, if Illinois entered a 3-way tiebreaker. I think Illinois would lose that though. But it would suddenly become a very interesting top of the Big Ten if Purdue wins this basketball game. If Wisconsin wins it, they likely lock up the Big Ten. They would have the only team that could possibly then catch up to them is Illinois. They would only be a game ahead of Illinois, but there's only like a game left. Wisconsin, all they would have to do is win that last basketball game, and they would have the 1 seed in the Big Ten for sure, without having to go down to any tiebreakers. Purdue with a loss would fall to 13-6, and Illinois would move past them. And if Ohio State was to win their basketball game tonight, they would move to 12-6, only be 1 game back in the win column from passing Purdue. So important thing to watch there if you're Ohio State. Big, solid Wisconsin fan tonight, because it's possible, conceivably, that you could end up getting to the 2 seed if Purdue and Illinois was out and you win out. So that's what you're looking forward to if you're an Ohio State fan. You're rooting against Purdue and Illinois no matter who they're playing. Nebraska is locked up in last place. They can't pass Minnesota, at least not from what I saw, but maybe I'm wrong. Nebraska, I don't think they can move, and that's the only team that's playing in the Big Ten. Moving on to the ACC, 7 o'clock at number 4 Duke, which is at 25-4. Traveling to Pitt, which is at 11-18. Duke favored by 14.5 points on ACC Network. Duke, obviously, with a loss, would put themselves only 1 game back in the win column. Well, only 1 game ahead in the win column behind Notre Dame. Notre Dame would be very close to passing them. Duke, if they win, though, tonight would put themselves at 16-3, and that'd be significantly ahead. But I mean, Duke and Notre Dame is in a very close battle, but I feel like Duke wins this conference pretty easily. They're playing Pitt. Pitt's in an interesting situation. Would they win? If with a big win, this would be a big win for Pitt, because that would move them to 7-12, and that would pass Boston College, Louisville, and Clemson, all 3, and I would put them in 10th place, ahead of, just behind Florida State and Syracuse. So it's a pretty substantial game for Pitt. It's a game you kind of really need if you're a Pittsburgh fan. If you lose, you're no longer, because right now they're losing the tiebreaker between Clemson, Louisville, and Boston College, but at least they're in it. You lose this game, then you are in 13th place in the ACC. You're a game behind those teams, unless Boston College, Louisville, and Clemson all lose. Louisville, I know, does play tonight, so if they lose to Virginia Tech, then Louisville could be in the same boat as you. Then we have at 8 o'clock Cincinnati, which sits at 17-12, trying to number 14 Houston, which is at 24-4. Houston favored by 15 on ESPNU. I think if I'm SMU, I don't really think there's a chance I can win the American, so I'd be rooting for Houston to win out. Outside of, I would like to beat them in the American little tournament thing. I feel like that's the best case scenario for SMU and Memphis down the stretches if Houston wins them all. Cincinnati sits at 7-9 in conference. With a loss, would fall to 7-10, but still be half a game up on East Carolina. 1 game in the win column ahead of the Pirates. Where they win, they can move to 8-9. 1 game back in the win column and 2 games back in the loss column from Tulane. I don't know if you can catch Tulane, but this is a game you kind of need if you're Cincy and you want to catch up to them, if you have hope of any hope of catching up to them. And then finally, in the Pac-12 at 10 o'clock, we have number 2 Arizona, which is at 25-3, traveling to number 16 USC, which is at 25-4. USC favored by 4.5 points on ESPN. And remember, this is a pretty substantial game. Remember, if USC wins this game, that would move them to 15-4 and fall Arizona to 15-3. And USC would not be quite out of this number 1 seed discussion quite yet. Obviously, USC with a loss would fall to 14-5, still be ahead of UCLA, but only 1 game in the win column ahead of UCLA. UCLA could force a tie. They would lose that tiebreaker, but at least if I'm UCLA, I still have hope if USC loses this game of getting the 2 seed in the Pac-12. So if you're a UCLA fan, rooting for USC to lose this game, and you're rooting for Arizona, no one else, USC and Arizona obviously rooting for their respective teams, but no one really else has any invested interest in this game. But who am I going to pick? I was debating this a long time. Villanova's favored by double digits against Providence. I don't get it. I mean, I think Villanova's a very good team. I'm not going to say that Providence should beat them. I don't know if they will, or even if they should. But I don't think Villanova is 10 points better than a very good Providence team. Providence is the 9th best team in the country. I'd go with the Friars, but that's just me. I'm not gonna bet against them. I think I'm gonna go with Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin over Purdue is a very good bet. I'm gonna take. They're at home, so that's a bright side there. Oh, I forgot to talk about the Big 12. Yeah, I don't care. At 7 o'clock, we have number 6 Kansas, which is at 23-5, traveling to TCU, which is at 18-9. Kansas favored by 5.5 on ESPN+. Basically, TCU's playing to stay in 5th place. They can't pass Texas. And Kansas is playing to not let Baylor catch up to them. Baylor got a big win against Texas yesterday. That's what's going on in the Big 12. But I'm going to go with Wisconsin, the Badgers over Purdue. I think the Purdue Boilermakers are a really good basketball team. But I think Wisconsin's a better one. Just in my personal opinion, I think Wisconsin's really good. I don't understand why they're ranked lower than Purdue, especially considering they won last week, unlike Purdue, against a solid Rutgers team. But everybody, this is GGB saying adios amigos and go Badgers.